Good afternoon. It is great to be here, and I am excited about our podcast for today. But this little introduction is an addition to the original conversation that I had with Corey LeCureux. And the reason I'm making this is because I have these nice microphones. I got an extra one so Corey would have one, and he came in, and everything was hooked up. Everything looked great, except that I forget to switch the computer over. And so it ended up recording the podcast on the computer microphone, which is pretty poor. So this little intro from me is just to apologize for the sound quality. We'll get it right next time, but it was such a good conversation. I wanted to save it and not try to do it again. So anyhow, I apologize for the sound quality. You might want to turn up your computer, your phone. But I hope you enjoy this great conversation about faith and dinosaurs. Well, good afternoon. I am the Reverend David Ramage. I'm not used to introducing myself that way, but for the podcast, I think I better. And want to introduce our guest today, Corey LeCureux. And I would have introduced him as pastor, and he told me no. So, Corey, introduce yourself.
My name's Corey, and I'm just some guy from down the road, basically. And I've got an interest in this kind of stuff. That's about it. David is like a very professional, and he has a wonderful relationship with God. He has.
Now, I didn't ask you to introduce me.
well, by way of contrast, this guy actually knows what he's talking about. Actually speaks with God and has God speak to him. Compared to that, I'm either the rodeo clown or the bull that's just raging around. That's it, and that's all I plan to be. I just plan to be the clown.
Well, I'm sorry to tell our listeners or watchers that. I used to refer to myself the exact same way, so now I'm not sure who the clown is, but anyhow, God listens to him. We listen to him, Corey, and he fills in for me preaching when I go on vacation and stuff. So I value his thoughts and his relationship with God. And the church values his thoughts, so that's why he's here. If he wants to, be the bull in the china shop or any of those, you're welcome to. I'm thinking as this is beginning that this might be the first podcast with a bunch of humor. So good. We haven't had one that I think has had too many laughs. So
you get what you get.
Absolutely. Well, I do want to take just a minute to say, as we are doing this podcast, to remind people why we're doing it, because it is not to get famous. It's not to make money. It is I call it a calling to be involved with human beings and play my part in helping people know God. I wrestle with how to say that because I'm not the person that's responsible for people knowing God, but in my calling in life, I have just discovered that being obedient to God in how I find Him and follow Him, when I'm in conversation with people, I tend to see those conversations gearing toward God, and that sometimes I can be a part of the help process. That sounds like I'm teetering on arrogance, but I want to have conversations about God. I want to grow. I want to help other people grow. And here's the point, in case I've danced around it long enough. People have big questions. And those big questions, in my opinion, they're never answered. And that's why they have them, especially in our church. You don't have somebody standing up going, what about the dinosaurs? And so that means that they're going forward with whatever we're doing, and I don't even know exactly what that means, but they're going forward doing the things we're doing in church, but they're holding back. Maybe they're holding back because they don't know how God could destroy every human on the planet on a flood and then save a few people. They don't know what about the Muslims and what about the Buddhists. So they have these big questions, and I have no I don't know. I'm stuck on the word arrogance lately. I have no dream of answering these questions, but I find that conversation helps people deal with those questions and dig in and find a deeper faith. And one of the things I'll just say right up front, see, this is why I was hoping you would call yourself a pastor, but whatever. I think he would call himself a prophet, but now that's like a step up from pastor. Anyhow,
I'll stick with rodeo clown.
The reason I am claiming to be a pastor, of course, which I am, is because somebody who is a Christian, a believer, a follower of Christ, but not at any high level, might have thoughts about Bible passages or faith. And when they hear me and possibly you say, I don't know what that means, or yeah, that's always bothered me, that's got to be an open door and a help for others to say, what? Whatever accolades I have, he's got all those accolades and he still doesn't understand that. I think that might spur faith, just to see what we don't know. Anyhow, that's kind of the purpose, is to shake up things a little bit, be honest about what we think we know, what we want to know, and draw you all into that in a way that maybe your questions are answered or at least addressed enough that faith might grow. Well, I already kind of threw out the question a little bit today. The question that was on our board at church is, can you explain the Ice Age, dinosaurs' disappearance? Was human life before the Ice Age, human life during the Ice Age, Adam and Eve / cavemen, ? I think that whole question does not surprise me that somebody would have it. It's just, I don't know the context of it. It looks very scientific to me. But we know, especially in the last 100 years, a lot of Christianity and segments of Christianity has been in a debate against science. Against meaning science is not compatible with faith. And I could go into that. I feel like going into it, but I'm going to deny myself the whole 130 years since Darwin. It's really fascinating to me that Christianity started trying to prove itself scientifically, but I'll put the brakes on and just say, and this is where I'm building up to asking you to dive in. Dinosaurs. The question is probably, humanity, if we take the creation story literally, then there's humans, and then there would be dinosaurs hanging out with humans. And then, of course, the question would be, was that before the Ice Age, after the Ice Age? I don't know how to frame the question, but what do you think this person might be asking? Is that a fair question?
Yeah, I think it is, and I'm gonna throw it back to you, David. But really, what it comes down to, I think, is where does our faith, the story of our faith, the Bible, where does that all fit within a timeline that we know now?
Yeah.
And you've got like a spectrum out there, right? There's one side questions are like this category, and the other side questions are this other category. And this one was to the far right, but I don't know I didn't bother looking at the category. But it sounded like it was something along the lines of, questions that trip you up.
Yeah.
And so probably somebody's sitting there reading their Bible, or listening to their amazing pastor, every Sunday. And they're like, hang on a second, where does the movie Ice Age fit into this? The squirrel with the nut and the mammoth and all that kind of stuff. Where does this all fit into this picture? I assume that's what they're asking. So the question that, I whenever I get a question, I like to make it more questions. because if I just tell you the answer is A, B, C, 1, 2, 3, you're not going to dig any deeper into it. And the whole point is for you to dig deeper. So the question that I would have asked this person in person would be, why should it? Does the Bible say anything about this, and this? Should it? Why should it? And what leads you to? And if the answer is yes, why?
Yeah.
Why should the Bible address that? And so I guess that's the question that I have for you. Why should it?
Why should the Bible be consistent with science? Is that kind of the question, or?
Yeah, why should the Bible have stuff in there about Neanderthals and the Ice Age and what we would call prehistory?
Yeah. I wasn't prepared for you to ask me. No, I know of kind of the way I want to answer that. I have never looked at the Bible that way, and that's going to get to our answer for sure. That I've never read the Bible to show me how DNA works and how tectonic plates work. But I also want to be careful to say, okay, so the Bible is valuable in this category, but it's not valuable over here. I think it's valuable across all of life, but I've never looked at it as trying to teach me science. And so
I disagree.
All right, lay it on me, because I'm obviously nervous about my answer.
So there are places that the Bible has no value. It has no value in your life. If you're trying to figure out how to prepare a key lime pie, you're gonna have some struggles if you're just sticking with the Bible.
No, if you were to pray without ceasing, God would tell you how to make the key lime pie.
Yeah.
Thanks for laughing.
Good luck finding that in the Bible.
Okay. I'm sorry to distract you.
Good luck finding my landline number. In the Bible, right? It's, you know why? Because it's not a phone book. It's not a cookbook.
Right.
It's not any of those things. And so, I would have a lot of questions. Why isn't the fact that Julius Caesar was stabbed to death mentioned in the Bible? There are things that happen in the arena that the Bible takes place that are major historical events that are never mentioned. The fall of the temple, the burning and looting of Jerusalem in 70 AD, that's not really mentioned. Maybe there's some prophetic things that you could look at, but it's not really mentioned, even though it was the cataclysmic event of Jewish history.
Right.
Whereas you have, if you want to include the Maccabees, you have tremendous details about the Maccabean Wars, which are almost not mentioned anywhere else in history. And there seems to be a focus to the Bible that there isn't in other texts that we would call scientific or historic or those kinds of things. So my answer to the question that I asked you, why should it, is it shouldn't, because it's not trying to address those things.
Right. And I think my answer, trying to say that the Bible has an impact on all of life, is because of faith. And that might be an interesting thought. Faith in God affects everything in life, I think. The Bible is a help for that faith. It's recorded people of importance of faith. So there's great value to the Bible, but I totally agree with you. It's never intended to do certain things. And so in that sense, it's not comprehensive. But like if you were to pray for what kind of car to buy, you wouldn't expect, a Honda Accord, because I think the Bible says that the disciples were in one accord.
In one accord. Yeah. 12 people in one accord.
Yeah, that's a bad joke, but it's fun to throw it out there.
Back to the clowns. A clown could do that.
Yeah. See, you said you're a clown, and now I have to clown it up to see who's the biggest clown. So yeah, the Bible just doesn't address it. And I know what I'm about to try to say is bigger than I can say, but it's so true. Humanity has, especially in the last 500 years, has been so focused on the material world, science, and fixing, medical knowledge and all that. We're so focused, we can't even get our head into the Bible writers. But humanity, for this huge expanse of time, has been about stories. And I use the word mythology. It'll trigger some Christians for sure, that I might be suggesting that the Bible is myth. And folks, I love the Bible. But there is a sense of mythology, and we need to accept that. And the reason I want to talk about that is because in order to pass down truth, you tell a story. And you tell a story many times that's bigger than life. And the stories that are bigger than life, which is a hint that they're not true in the sense of, did these facts happen, whether they did or not.
Well, they're true. They just may not be scientific.
Yes.
In our terminology.
Right. So I wasn't sure that we would get on this word truth today because, man, it's a big matzo ball. It should probably be its own 10 podcasts. But to discover truth, science is not going to provide that. It can provide facts and so forth. But the story of Adam and Eve and a serpent, and those things evoke in us truth about life, and if you don't believe that, then just go home and argue with your wife or blame her for something that you did. You'll see Adam and Eve are contemporary people, right? The story of how they ended up eating the fruit, God shows up and Adam blames God, which I think is hilarious. You made me her and she did it. So he's blaming God and the woman. All of that is contemporary. So there's truth there. And I don't want to ask you this, but is the story true? Did it happen? I'm actually not even interested in that. I'm not interested if there was a serpent, don't eat that. Or did God really say? I'm not even interested in that because the story evokes truth. So that might answer a lot of questions out there, because people are going to ask, is the Bible literal? And I think you and I are playing with the idea that's like, I don't think it's a good question because it comes up a lot, but there's got to be something deeper than that we really want to know. Then is the Bible literal? I don't know. Do you have any response to that? Because
Yeah. So I always like to say it like this. If that's the Genesis story is not a myth, if it is not a myth, if there was a snake walking around trying to get people to eat fruit, then it really is trying hard to be it. If I was going to write an origin story for a faith community and I wanted to make it sound like mythology, I would write it like that.
Yeah.
So it's trying to be, and there's no reason it shouldn't be. Every other origin story from every other culture has myth because history is a scope. It's a period of time that you are reasonably assured what did or did not happen. We know somewhat what happened up to like maybe a century ago, and then it gets a little murky.
Yeah.
And it gets murkier from there on out. And that's in a society that has written documentation about things that happened in the 17th, 15th century. When you don't have any of that written documentation, because some of these stories are some of the first things that were written down, then it becomes one campfire story after another going back into your ancestry. And so at some point, you're going to have some real whoppers told around that campfire. Yeah. Now, the question is it true? Is it true? That's a different question altogether. So one of my favorite theologians, when people are bickering about this kind of stuff, he wrote that, who cares? What does it say?
Yeah.
Who cares? What does it say? What does that story, the origin story of the Hebrew faith, what does it say to you right now?
Yeah.
That's the most important thing. And we can get caught up in some of this. As far as I know, sure, they did have a walking snakes selling fruit. Okay. But what does it say? Whether it happened or not exactly like that, according to our scientific perspective, whether it happened or not, what does it say? That's really the most important thing when it comes to truth.
Yeah. And I'll take off on one of my little tangents with that too. So the story, if it was written for modern people, are we modern or postmodern? I don't know what to call us. If it was written for us now, it would be, it would be an internal process. Oh, God told me not to eat that. And, oh, God is so mean. He gave me everything to eat, but why doesn't he want me to eat that one thing? Blah, 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 blah. And my theory is that we would come up with the same question. Did he really say, and by the way, this is weird. If you read it literally, the woman was not told not to eat it. It was Adam, and then she's made out of the rib. So Adam had to tell her, which is just, that's a whole nother podcast. But
Yeah.
okay, so the internal process is, did God really say? And it's like, well, if I do what God told me not to do, I'll discover what it's like to be God. I mean, I'm stretching it to mean what it means in the scripture. So what I'm saying is, if we write it modern, we're going to come up with a very similar scheme, but we're going to leave out that there's anything tempting me other than the fruit itself. And so the serpent becomes, a source of temptation. And I'm going to go off a little bit of a dive here and say, how do you introduce to humans that there are forces in the world unseen that actually lead you into temptation? I don't know whether you believe that or not, but I do. And so there's this, so now we have a symbol of evil forces as the serpent, and it's very effective. Even Jesus, when he goes in the wilderness and is tempted, it still seems like he doesn't have to have Satan. He's hungry. And 40 days hungry, and he looks at a stone. I can't put myself in Jesus's shoes except with the hunger. It'd be like, turn into bread. So the temptation of eating and turning something into bread makes sense to me. His life, if he knew what God was calling to do, which I kind of think he does, he knows what the plan is, so to speak. He can, is the first one to throw himself off the temple? He knows that he's going to give his life. So there's a temptation to give his life in a way that God saves him, and everybody is like, wow, you must be God. Anyhow, what I'm saying is the temptations could be the internal mechanism of every human.
Yeah.
But then we introduce Satan into that, and it broadens it, and it says, not all of your internal stuff is just you. I personally value that as a story. But how are you going to tell that without looking like mythology?
Yeah.
And I'll stop here because I am worried that, well, if you're really super conservative, you've probably already turned off, or you're commenting that we're all going to hell in this podcast, and that's okay. Jesus went to hell. I'd be willing to take a trip there too, maybe once in a while, as long as he pulls me out. Sorry, that might be the most heretical thing I've ever said, but
Thought I was the rodeo clown.
I want to just shift away from the Bible for a second and say, in the northern Michigan, we have this legend of Sleeping Bear Dunes, and we all grew up knowing it from the Native Americans. Certainly not our legend, but it's this, a mother cub and her, or a mother bear and her cubs are swimming across Lake Michigan, right? And the mother arrives on the land first, and she turns and she's waiting for her cubs, and they don't make it, and they drowned. And so as they drowned, the legend has it they become the islands, the Manitou Islands, right? And so if you look at the coast, I guess, once you've been told that it's a bear, you can see that there's a bear lying down, and then the two islands are cubs of the bear. Okay, so in the Western modern thought, I think I can say to everybody, as long as you're not a Native American, and I apologize if there's any Native Americans watching this, we all know that story is not true. In the way we look for truth, we know that didn't happen. Okay, and that's how we tend to define truth. But then I'll back up and say, why are they teaching that to their children? And first of all, I might ask you, why would they teach that to their children if it's not true?
Well,
I'm catching you off guard here.
Yeah, no, I don't. This is getting into philosophy. I don't know how we could possibly say that that's not true.
Thank you.
What is truth? Like, did that bear actually turn into a peninsula in Leelanau? That's not the point. That's not the point.
Yeah.
The truth lies in something other than, if this happened, then that happened. It lies in something other than the scientific method. They're trying to say something else. It's not history. History is this happened, then that happened. That's not what they're trying to do. They're trying to pass on a story about their culture. and their people
Right.
and the sacredness of their land and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And is that stuff true? That's the question. And the same thing for us in the Bible. Is that true? That man is fallen, prone to temptation, lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, and pride of life. Is that true? Yes. However, is there a hope? Is there a hope even in the midst of what seems like hopelessness? That's true. That's absolutely
Amen.
true.
Told you he was a preacher.
Wait till
And I dumped that question on him. I was going to say you weren't prepared, but obviously you were prepared because I wanted to answer it. I was like chomping at the bit to answer that, and I love your answer, so thank you. And then I just take the practicality of children growing up thinking that this land is sacred, and then looking at a Western mindset of how we treat land, and I don't want to be racial, but white Europeans, how we have treated the earth. We use it for resources. And so I have a problem with that. But if you're a Native American in this northern Michigan, you might grow up with that story and you think this land is sacred. Wow, that's true. So you will treat it with respect. And then there's the mother and the loyalty to her cubs. And even though they're dead, they're there forever. There's an eternity to the family. There's so much there of what you said, truth. There's truth, not in a historical or not in a, historical. This actually happened. So I wanted to share that with you all as just an example of a story that we would say in our modernness is not true, but there's lots of truth there.
Who would that not be true for?
I know.
Think of anybody who has ever lost a child.
Yeah.
That child is going to sit there in the middle of the sea of their memories the rest of their life.
Yep.
I'm fine with saying that's true.
Yeah, that's cool.
And we just get caught up in some of our own stuff when it comes to what is truth.
Okay, so wow, this is cool. Dinosaurs. So we are addressing it whether you think we are or not, because the dinosaurs, and I'll just answer this right off the cuff, that I think oh boy, as soon as I say off the cuff, I'm like, man, it's dangerous though. It's dangerous because I have a flexibility with the timeline of humanity. And I'll just tell you that straight up. And by the way, it's hard to put this in a context of faith because much of our faith is told to us that you have to have all of the pieces in order to be saved, go to heaven. And I am not that way. I know that I can get this wrong. And I don't think God is going to like kick me out of his presence because I didn't place the dinosaurs in the right place or whatever. So I have a freedom with that, and I hope you do too, but whatever. So here we go. The creation story, if that's the first human being, and that's fine. I don't deny it or totally accept it, except that I believe that this book is blessed by God. And so it's really an incredible book. In fact, we say in our Reformed faith, we give it the highest authority. So I'm not looking to any other book. I'm not looking to the legend of the Sleeping Bear Dunes for my faith truth, even though I think it has truth. The Bible is at the top of the list for me. But I don't know how to reconcile Adam and Eve as the first humans, and then were they like riding dinosaurs? And because science, puts the dinosaurs in millions of years ago, and so to me that's a question mark, and I am not ever going to pretend to be a scientist. So I haven't done any carbon dating in my life. I don't know how to say that carbon dating is a good thing or a bad thing. I have no idea. So here's a theory, and I would say that Adam and Eve are the representatives or the first humans that are like us, and that gives a room for everything before, meaning dinosaurs, cavemen. If there was less humans, I mean, again, I have no idea. I don't want to claim that I'm saying this is true. I'm just playing around with it. If there were cavemen who were more animal than human, and let's say they didn't have consciousness, sorry to throw that term at you, but there's possibilities that I don't know about. I'm open to that, which would put the dinosaurs right where the scientists say they are, millions of years ago. And I don't expect humanity to be a part of that. But if they are, fine. I don't care. And I know that I'm also speaking to people who have heard about the big push for 120 years to make the faith scientific. And so they're saying that you can follow the genealogy of the Bible from Adam right up to now, and that's going to be 6,000 years, 7,000 years. We're going to put a number on that. And I'm like, okay, again, I don't know if that is the center of our faith. I don't know that it's important to think that. If it's true, which it might be, then Adam and Eve were after the dinosaurs. I'm okay with it. You might say, well, wait a minute, it says in the beginning. And I will tell you that, first of all, God doesn't have a beginning. And the creation story has a beginning, but there is a lot of what I would call ambiguity. As soon as that text says that there was, and the different translations are floating around my head, there was darkness and chaos or a void over the waters. Mm-hmm. So it's describing something that we don't understand. And it's not, in my opinion, it's not bad. It's just not able to sustain human life. And I'll back it up a little bit. That's too much. I'm just going to stop at saying, I think Adam and Eve were after the dinosaurs. And when I read the text, I don't think the text is trying to correct me on that. But what do you think?
Well, so I would not answer that question that way, because
thank goodness,
if we are living, the question maybe is like meta of where in the timeline does this or that fit. And I say that that's outside the Bible. That is not something that is a question for the Bible.
Right.
We can have that meta conversation. This happened and that happened, that history, but the Bible's not trying to do that. And the people that wrote the Bible had no idea about this timeline that we're trying to enforce upon it. I think it's our job to be expositionary with the scriptures. And that's where I go back to, what does it say? What can you faithfully pull out of any of these passages, right, unto the application into your life? So what does it say? That is the most important thing. So these people that wrote the Bible, and there were a bunch of them, and especially in Genesis, there were a lot of them. And they
were all named Moses. No, I'm sorry,
right.
I'm just teasing you.
They're just Moses, right? And they in Genesis chapter 1 and Genesis chapter 2, they're kind of arguing with each other.
Right.
And so
sorry, folks, you don't know what he's talking about exactly. I hope you do. But there's two different creation stories.
Yes, Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 kind of repeat each other in different ways because they're different authors.
Yeah.
So there's, but what we do know is that those people were not aware of our scientific view of history.
Right.
And so it's not really fair for me to go back on that. We didn't know, Western society didn't know anything about the dinosaurs, let's say, until the 1840s. Right? George Washington, James Madison, they didn't know anything about the dinosaurs either. Right? And so you would have never heard them use that word because that word didn't exist.
Yeah.
And so why isn't this in that text? Because they weren't aware of it. And so if you're trying to extract truth from the passage, it's going to be very, very difficult to do that unless you enter the passage. And within that passage, they didn't really have the same understanding of history. They didn't have the same understanding of the science. There were dead creatures possibly underneath their feet, and they had been sitting there for millions of years and turning into motor oil somehow. But they weren't aware of that because there was no such thing as archaeology. There was no such thing as this quest that we have for ancient prehistory. And so that's how I look at that. Again, going back to the fact that you don't find key lime pie in there either, even though it's delicious.
So now I'm going to pressure you because, I get where you're coming from and I like it, but I'm also wanting to know where you place the story. Do you of Adam and Eve or first humans? Do you place them after the dinosaurs or before?
No,
Drum roll.
I place them in the beginning.
This is funner than I thought.
I also placed John 1 in the beginning.
Yeah, of course.
So the other thing that you brought to mind is in Genesis 1, right at the very beginning, the story starts off with the fact that there was the world was empty and void or chaotic.
Yeah.
There was chaos on the waters, or there was a void on the waters. That sounds like an awesome Led Zeppelin song, first of all. Chaos on the waters. That language all sounds so metaphorical.
Yeah.
And it's trying to be metaphorical,
right.
And we're trying to jam in a bunch of other stuff from our current time. And the other thing is, this was poetry.
Right.
This was written in poetic form. And so we're trying to turn it into a scientific textbook kind of language maybe thing when it was a poem. It's really hard to get science from a poem. And so are we being unfair to what the text is telling us?
I'm really impressed, and I hope you all caught this, that my question was trying to force him to answer, where is he placing Adam and Eve, before the dinosaurs or after? And he would not allow me to force him into that. And his discussion about the Bible since that has all been taking a stand on that. I love it. And he said something, I think, at the beginning about me being, I don't know if he didn't say smart, but something. And I'm like, he's the smart one. He's the one that keeps consistent. I'm all over the map. I'll come out of here today going, maybe the dinosaurs were after Adam and Eve. And by the way, the Seventh-day Adventists, I don't want to offend any Seventh-day Adventists. I'm open to followers of Christ all being in the presence of Christ someday, hopefully. But Seventh-day Adventists have children's books with cowboys riding dinosaurs. And
sounds awesome.
It does. And that might, if the person that asked this question is listening, I want you to know that there are people who place the dinosaurs after Adam and Eve, and their whole structure of their faith. Well, I don't want to use the word faith. The whole structure of their denomination is based on that 7-day creation story, and that it's 6,000 years ago, and all of that is literal. And so they have to have Adam and Eve, or any relative of Adam and Eve, riding the dinosaurs, because their system will fall apart if it's not. Yeah. So,
well, let me run an ISO here for a second. That's a basketball thing. Sorry. That's how I was raised. That's what I believed.
Ooh.
Absolutely. I mean, into Bible college, into training for the ministry. And I remember actually asking a question one time while I was in college. And the question that I asked was, all right, that star in the sky is however many hundreds of thousands of light years away. So it took hundreds of thousands or a million light years for that light, or to get a million years for that light to get to Earth. And now I can see that star, which probably doesn't even exist anymore. Yeah. How does that fit within a 6,000 year history? And the answer that I was given that made me go a different direction in my faith. The answer I was given by a very, very smart Presbyterian person was God made it that way. God made the light so if the light starts going here, right? Creation occurs as if the light was halfway here or whatever. Oh, okay. And then action. And now everything starts happening, right? And so the earth was made to appear to be millions and millions of years ago. The light seems like it is that long. That is how God did it. And I'm like, and I remember thinking in my head, God's really making this complicated.
He is.
And he is twisting, here's the problem. I sound like I'm being disrespectful to how I was raised. I thought that type of argument, that type of philosophical argument, made God's creation wrap around the scientific discoveries that we have made. God is trying to obey science. with that discovery. And my opinion, God is way bigger than that.
Yeah. Good. It's funny. I told you that I'm all over the map, and I think I'm easily affected. And I can tell you that I could actually support that view biblically because God created light, and then He created the sun and the stars.
Yes, that's right. Yes. Yes.
Wow. And I'm not saying I'm buying it. I think that is complicating faith tremendously. But I think it's a good point to stop and say something important, because the question is so much about science. And so I think it's important that we address that science and faith in God, in my opinion, are completely compatible, because I believe God created everything. So God created things and we're looking at them. We're trying to figure them out. And science is trying to figure it out. And good science is to figure out stuff, how it works. And so that is a pure good thing. That is, I want to say pure science. That is good. Figuring out what God has made and how does it work? How can we live with it? How can we heal things? That's great. Now there's bad science, and bad science, as far as I know, my mother was a biology teacher, so I've got science in my DNA somewhat, but I'm not afraid of finding anything on the earth that's going to disprove God. I'm not worried about that at all. So I want to tell any viewers, I think science and faith go together seamlessly, but why don't they? And there's blame on both sides. I'll say something about science. Science doesn't work well when you have a bias, and humans always have a bias. So if science says that they're completely unbiased, but then they say, well, this can't be true because we don't believe in God, and that's a lot of science, is the basis of science is there is no God, well, then their science ends up being skewed somehow. Now, again, I'm not a scientist. I don't know how to criticize that effectively, but I'm saying science has to be pure and I'm going to make up a word, evidentiary. It has to be based on the evidence, and I'm not afraid of that evidence. I might be afraid if that evidence is twisted to gain for somebody, and that would be bad science. Okay, then on the church side, the church trying to prove itself is something that I am very much against. And what I mean by prove itself is to use science and force the Bible into it, as you have alluded to so many times. And we know this with Galileo. At least Galileo is kind of the symbolic center of this, that the church believed the earth was the center of the universe because the Bible said it. And I'm like, it says that? Anyhow, they thought it said that. And Galileo comes along and says, no, it's not. And so all this blew up. So in that sense, the church was bad church or bad faith. It was expecting the Bible to prove the world's mechanism correctly. And of course, we got it wrong. That's bad church or bad faith. So there can be bad science and bad church. I'll stop there and see if you want to jump in on any of that.
Yeah, well, I'm just distracted by the fact that it'd be really cool to ride a Stegosaurus.
Well, yeah, of course.
I want to do that.
Have you seen Jurassic Park? It doesn't go well. Right. It does not ever go well.
That's true. That's true. I guess what I would say to that is that for a long time, as you've alluded to, Christians, faithful Christians, have been at war with science, and we're coming up with these crazy explanations for why the Bible's true. And why the Bible's true doesn't have anything to do with science. And what strikes me is the more I read about science, the more I read about exploration and some of these amazing mysteries of physics and space and time and all this kind of stuff, it humbles me and it makes me more impressed with the creation of it all. And then just the idea that we live on a class M planet in a gigantic universe that's continually expanding.
Yeah.
And that it would take us a lifetime just to get to the nearest star system, even if we were able to accomplish that at all. And here we are in this gigantic, I mean, it's mind-boggling how big just this galaxy is, how big the universe is actually impossible to comprehend. And here we are in this little tiny place having this conversation. When you start thinking about the expansiveness of what we know reality to be, it is absolutely humbling. And there is something that causes me to stand in awe. I love sitting out in my yard at night and just looking up at the stars and just feeling that humility. And if that's not truth, what is?
The truth of our place, which is, it's not even as small as an ant when we look at the cosmos. Yeah, well said.
The other thing comes to mind is back to that Led Zeppelin song. So there's chaos on the water. There's a void floating on the face of the deep, I think is what it is.
Are you alluding to Smoke on the Water, which was not Led Zeppelin?
Oh, okay.
Oh, sorry.
I was like, it would be a cool rock song.
Yeah.
So there was a void floating on the face of the deep, all very metaphorical language, in my opinion. But that chaos was solved. Chaos was a problem, and that chaos was solved with creation.
Yep.
And after that, you can see that metaphor going throughout the Bible. And in the end, when your will is done, O Lord, on earth as it is in heaven, that chaos, an end is put to it. And the order of creation overcomes it. That's the story of the Bible. That story is true. And we can participate that today. We can participate within that today. And so I look back at Genesis 1 and nowhere in my mind, is this true?
Yeah.
Is this true? Absolutely it's true.
Yeah.
And it's true then, it's true today, and it's going to be true tomorrow. And we can participate in that right now.
Yeah.
Back to it. What does it say? And what it says is a very, very powerful story.
Man, guys, he usually preaches when I'm gone. To be in the same room with him when he preaches is inspiring. And of course, now I want to preach another related sermon because I'm so glad you went there, because it is almost my favorite thing to say, that when we try to follow God and to love him, and when we try to love our neighbor, these two monumental tasks of humanity, by the power of the Spirit, we are ordered. Our life is ordered into creation in all the good ways. And when we turn around and go our own way, we are embracing chaos. And I'm saying it different than you said it, but I'm feeling the same thing, that we can be an agent of chaos in the world, and we can be an agent of God's ordering. And I love that. And how could you, if you believe that, or believe that God is truly there calling us to love him and love our neighbor, how can you not read that story and say anything about it not being true? I don't know if I said all the negatives right or wrong, but it is true. It's true. It's true. And I'll even pick out one thing that I'm fascinated by. We all think the first sin was the eating of the fruit. And of course it is, except for me recently, the sin seems to be, I don't know how to say it or set it up right. The sin to me that I'm thinking about now, the real sin, is their shame and hiding from God. Because that meant that, oh no, we ate the fruit. We did the one thing God said not to do. And so now we're toast. We cannot be in his presence. And I think God could have handled that. And that's a big matzo ball. Mm-hmm. But I think as we've learned about God through Christ, hey, he can handle sin. I mean, it took a lot. It took the life of his son. But the eating of the apple, the mistake or the sin, is one thing, but it's their understanding now that God cannot handle this. That seems huge to me. That's chaos. I am going to go away from God because he can't handle my sin. You are just embracing the very first verse, there's chaos. So I like those images, metaphors. All of that is bringing us closer to the truth. The truth is, wow, I shouldn't have said that because now I want to say it out loud. The truth is God. That's all I have to say.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and even with that, if I'm pretty dumb, so I like to apply things, and because these big concepts are confusing. But I mean, a lot of us were raised with parents like that,
Yeah.
where you weren't allowed to make mistakes.
Right.
And I've tried to parent in a way that embraces mistakes, and then because mistakes are amazing learning opportunities. If you're never allowed to make mistakes, you're never allowed to learn. And God's a whole lot better parent than I am, and so. I think that's actually a beautiful thing, and it's true. I mean, we're talking about this ancient story, and it's true. It's so true that we can apply it here thousands of years later.
Yeah. And if you don't know, I am very playful. I'm not afraid to talk about ideas. I actually am afraid when it's public because people can really criticize these thoughts. But I'd like to ask questions that nobody asks just to mess everything up. And the one question is, what would God have done if Adam and Eve had said, "I'm so sorry, we blew it. It didn't even taste that good," or whatever a true repentance would look like. I don't know. And I know that that's actually impossible.
I know what he would have done. He would have grounded them from riding dinosaurs for a whole week. When I was done with the ministry, I was done with the ministry mostly because the ministry was done with me. Yeah. And then I stepped away, felt so much relief in that, and I've gone down a different career path. And it took a little while. It took a little while to come back to the Bible. And when I did, I came back to it without the same assumptions, and I didn't have to toe a party line. I didn't have to participate in propaganda. I could just let it be what it is for me. And it's so much more interesting.
Yeah.
It is so much more interesting. It's so much deeper. I get so much more out of it. And I guess for the person asking this question, I think it's a good question.
Yes.
Because the deeper question is there, what is the Bible?
Yeah.
What is the Bible? And what I want to say to everybody is it is so much more than these little categories that we let it fit into. And sometimes when we're trying to make it do something it was never meant to do, we make it smaller. But if you allow it to do what it was meant to do, it's so much more. And so, for me to get away from the whole riding dinosaurs type of timeline issue, and it's a theory. It's called young Earth theory, and that's what I was raised. And I've got away from that. Oh, you've lost your faith. No, I've gained it.
Yeah,
I've gained it because it's so much more than just that.
Yeah.
I go back to the question: what does it say? So before, instead of extrapolating something from a text, I was interjecting what I was taught into the text. And that's the opposite of listening. Yeah. When it comes to our biases, we're going around looking for key lime pie when it's not trying to tell you anything about baking at all. And so then we start to twist the text to make it sound like it's key lime pie because it's got to be in there somewhere. It's got to answer these questions for me or else it's a useless book. And I just left all that behind and I just wanted to know what it says. And I found so much more.
Okay, so listening to the text, not listening to all the pressures of what you're supposed to find there. Just listen to the text. Man, there's a lot of good gold nuggets today. I hope you guys think so too. We are going to wrap this up. So, man, there's been so much. There's no way I can recap it. But don't be afraid to read the Bible, but try to get rid of the noisy voices in your head and listen to the text. I call that being prayerful, but I'm on the what's called the churchy side. I always say the churchy things: pray, read the Bible. But those things are not supposed to be the recipe. They're just come into this with your heart open to what it's saying, and then it becomes a beautiful help. A beautiful thing. So, wow, we've laughed a lot, and man, we've covered some territory. We think conversations like this are helpful to kind of break out of maybe the box that you're in that's keeping your faith at a certain place. So we are glad to have this conversation. And you're welcome to comment, and you're welcome to email me personally if you don't want to put it on the internet. But we thank you for your time, and may the peace of Christ be with you.